friends, myself Sachin from team Decipher, and today I'm here with you to discuss chapter in the economic survey, that is prices, agriculture and food. This is part 1 of that chapter, and I think now I need no introduction, myself Sachin Bhardwaj. Okay, in this chapter we will first discuss the overall trend in inflation. But before discussing the trends in inflation, we first should understand that what basically WPI and CPI are actually. Wholesale price index and consumer price index are the two primary measures of inflation. That means we measure inflation by using these two indexes. So, before proceeding to know the difference between the two indexes which we use for inflation, let us understand what an index basically signifies. An index figure reflects the change in a set of associated variables over a time period and in a particular direction. So, mind it, we use certain terminology here. It said that it reflects changes in certain variable over a time period. I hope the breakup of this definition in itself is explaining you the whole phenomenon. Changes we all know, whether up or down. Variable here is the rate of inflation, and over a time period it may be throughout a year or quarter to quarter or month to month. So thus, now if we sum up this, price index is reflective of the total change in the price level paid by a producer or customer. मैंने प्रोड्यूसर के साथ WPI को टिक किया है और कंज्यूमर के साथ CPI को क्लिक किया है because they are associated with them respectively. We'll come to that later on, that what conduces WPI to be a whole price index and associated with the producers, and consumer price index as it has been associated with the consumers. Let's understand the little tidbits of how actually inflation measuring work in India is going on. In the Indian context, you can say that there are 5 national indexes which are accounted for the inflation measures, that include WPI and other CPI. 4 CPIs are there. WPI is single and CPI is 4 in number. First of all, we'll talk about the WPI. WPI index reflects the average changes in prices in wholesale market. The change of goods that are bought and sold in wholesale market. WPI in India is published by the Office of Economic Advisor, which is under Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Further, the data of WPI is monitored and updated on weekly basis. And it takes account into 676 items in case of India. So the various commodities taken into consideration for computing the WPI, we can categorize them to make these cluster of 676 items more understandable. Let us categorize these items in categories. First of all, you can categorize into primary article, fuel and power, and you can categorize in manufacturer good. So this is the bunch of articles these 676 items make basket of. So our primary articles included for the computation of WPI, that include food articles and non-food articles plus minerals. This primary article we are talking about. And as far as this fuel and power sector is concerned, it contains power, light, lubricants, electricity, coal mining, and mineral oil. On the front of manufacturer goods, we include the food products, the beverages, tobacco products, wood and wood products, textiles, paper and paper products, basic metals, alloy, rubber, and so on. So, an important point to take note of is that wholesale price does not include the cost of services. Mind it. Nowhere in primary articles or in fuel and power or in manufactured goods we are nowhere including the cost of services. And mind it, we are a service driven economy. More than 50% of our GDP is made up from the service. So further, as WPI accounts for change in general price level of goods at a wholesale level, it actually fails to communicate the actual burden borne by the end consumer, because it is representing the fluctuation in the price at the wholesale level. So after that there are the taxes and various other things. So what actually and consumer is taking burden of, that has not been reflected by the wholesale price index. So WPI is you can say a primary measure that is used by the Indian central government for ascertaining the inflation as WPI, in contrast to CPI, which accounts for changes in price at an early distribution stage. So, in contrast to this, CPI is computed by executing a weighted average. Weighted average on what? We take weighted average on a particular set of goods and services. Mind it, now we will be including services as well. The computation of CPI takes into account its price changes and the actual inflation that affects the end consumer. So, in preliminary, they may be asking a question, then in which particular sort of index we use or we monitor the cost of services. For that matter, CPI would be your choice for as an answer. Thus, CPI reflects the changes in retail price of specified goods and services over a time period which are traded by particular consumer group. Now, we should ask ourselves a question, that why does India use WPI instead of CPI to calculate on inflation? If CPI is so much pinpointing to the end consumers' needs, then why the hell India is using WPI? There are certain reasons for this. Let us elaborate one by one so that even you can write a question, a direct question in economics in your paper 3 on this particular topic. First of all, data on wholesale price index is available every week, whereas data for CPI, consumer price index, is only available at every month. So while data on consumer price index is only available every month, so there is a time lag in CPI data availability compared to the WPI data availability, which can impact, ये जो time lag है, this can impact the decision making for both. देखिए, हमारे यहाँ इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी से रिलेटेड दो डिसीजन मेकिंग बॉडीज हैं जो सेंट्रल लेवल पे काम करती हैं, एक RBI और एक सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट इटसेल्फ. सो दिस टाइम लैग विल बी making an impact on decision making powers of both RBI and the central government of India. So this is the reason. Apart from this, in India, we do not have one CPI calculated per se. As I told you in earlier slide, we are having four such indexes, four CPIs indexes. In fact, earlier there were four CPIs calculated for four different set of workers. Now we have three such CPIs in recent times, out of which the most famous CPI is for CPI for industrial workers, which we call as CPI-IW, CPI for industrial workers. The others used currently are CPI for agricultural laborers and CPI for rural laborers. Thus, the argument used therefore is that there is no one CPI value, so we cannot use such values, since they are not one, for decision making either by the RBI or, for that matter, for the government of India. So, according to our policy makers or the decision makers at RBI and go elsewhere, it seems that WPI has a broader coverage compared to all the CPIs. Well, you can say in terms of commodities covered, or in terms of quotations, larger number of non-agricultural products and tradable items which are actually missing in CPI. So this composition of CPI itself is lagging behind the composition of WPI, which gives it a cutting edge over determining the actual pulse of the Indian inflation market. So, apart from this, interest rates which the RBI controls may not have much of a correlation with high food prices. And therefore, saying this, decision makers may feel that since they cannot target inflation across the major sections constituting the CPI, they would rather focus on the WPI, which constitutes of goods on whose demand the interest rate may have a more significant effects. Okay, so WPI is calculated on an all India basis, while again CPI is calculated for specific centers in India, and then this is aggregated into an all India index. So there are reasons that why we use WPI instead of CPI as a national index to calculate inflation. So does RBI use WPI or CPI to manage monetary policy decisions? While earlier the Reserve Bank of India was using WPI for calculating calculating the inflation index, but now the CPI inflation, which is largely taken into an account. The RBI highlights in its inflation expectation based on CPI inflation data that comes in. For example, it sets target on CPI inflation and it monitors it accordingly. Many analysts for long had suggested that RBI should move to CPI data versus WPI data, which had now happened in the last couple of years. So coming back to overall trend in inflation. Now, I hope you people now understand the difference between CPI and WPI, what are their constituents. So we will come back to the core of this particular chapter of economic survey, and we will be now watching and understanding about the overall trend in inflation. So the persistent and elevated levels of inflation, in particular we'll talk about the food inflation, they were actually a major concern for the government during that period of 2010-11 to 2013-14. So during this high inflation period, the 2011 to 13-14, the average wholesale price index, that is WPI, was almost 8%. And average inflation based on the consumer price index for industrial workers, that is CPI-IW, was above the comfort level. It was at 9.7%. As you can see in the chart, that the rising trend reversed from 2014-15 onwards, and the economy has been experiencing sustained moderation in general inflation since. As you can see there, it was 2, now it is -3. So the new monthly CPI, that CPI combined with the base year, देखिए जो new CPI है इसका base year हमने रखा है 2012 equals to 100 points. The new CPI combined, it has now been taken as a measure of headline inflation, and is tracked by Reserve Bank of India to anchor its monetary policy. So, guys, this is it for the first part of this lecture. In later lectures coming to be from this part, we'll be discussing about of impact of fall in crude prices. I mean, what was its impact on the inflation? What was the food inflation like, and what was the difference between rural and urban sector inflation? Till then, I thank you for watching and stay with me. Keep in touch, and do visit our website, that is www.decipheриas.com, for more such lectures and analysis, simple analysis, which will help you in your examinations. Till then, bye. Thank you.